To Albany, meet with a lot of people in the legislature and in the governor's administration, focusing around the negotiation of the state budget, which will be passed at the end of March. And what we're looking for is both money in the state budget and also legislation to be incorporated into the budget that will deal with setting some basic protections and guidelines that is this campaign's agenda about making sure that funding is provided for good funding for wages and for infrastructure and organizational needs, and contracting language to try to make sure that organizations are fairly dealt with and paid promptly.
You know, I would just add, the enormity of the budget, over $153 billion. If New York was a country, it would have the 11th largest economy in the world. So I think we can do better. But we have to, as New Yorkers, make our case known. So yes, the Assembly will have its budget, which is usually the good news. In the picture. The governor has his, and then the Senate, which is controlled by the other house, in my case I'm a Democrat, is usually the one that, is the sticking point. But you're going to have to meet with leaders in every chamber and on the second floor with the governor's folks to make your case known. And frankly, I think you should be pretty loud about it because, as you say, the stakes couldn't be higher.
Yeah. So Charles Archer, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a quick question. Charles Archer with the Thrive Network. We support people with disabilities, intellectual, etc. One question that I get really often from either families, individuals, and staff is, with the state administration and what the governor is doing, how will the White House administration affect it at some point, either now or later?
Bad. The notion that it is government's job to raise money from people who have a lot of it to help pay to support the lives of people who don't have resources is not the platform of the people who control our government in Washington right now, to say the least. And so there are going to be radical cuts coming down in Medicaid and human services and aid to education, and restrictions on what money can be spent on and who can spend it, whether it's relating to immigrant status or other issues that are going to make life very difficult for the human services sector in New York and the people that are served. That's going to put a lot of burden on New York State as a more progressive state to fill those gaps. But I believe we have to do that.
Well, and I just want to add to that. So I think that this is why we've been saying this for a long time, Groundhog's Day. I mean, we've been saying this for a long time. I think, and as we've been saying it, it's been getting worse and worse, and the numbers have been showing that the nonprofits are getting worse and worse. We've seen increased closures of nonprofits. We've seen more and more nonprofits not taking on government business. And so because that is coming, is sort of my point earlier, we need to make sure that the nonprofits as institutions are shored up so that they can weather this storm. There's no doubt that we are, as a state, as a nation, going to see shrinkage in terms of like the amount of dollars that are available for our services. But the way and the approach to the way we fund those currently is fundamentally broken. And if we keep pushing it out that way, we are guaranteed to see more nonprofits falter. And why that is particularly problematic is because nonprofits don't come to the table empty-handed with government. They come with private fundraising, philanthropic dollars, and a lot of power from the community to do things, with volunteers and all of that. So we come with our hands full, and then we are subsidizing the work of government. Oftentimes the reverse is told in terms of the story, that government is somehow subsidizing us, and that's clearly not the case. We are bringing a lot to the table, and if we as institutions fall and disappear or are forced to shrink to such small levels, we are really not gonna be able to be there when this storm comes. So I think there's a lot of question marks about what will happen in a Trump administration in terms of our budgets, but that is why this objective is so important right now, because we do think that this is coming.
And let me just add, you know, you hear a lot from certain sectors of government that they prefer public-private partnerships. Well, that's what we have with our nonprofit sector. Government has outsourced its responsibility to look after the most vulnerable to our nonprofit sector, but we gotta pay for it.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the message has been, we outsource it and it's up to you. But we have to pay for every component, including salaries and wages.
We really can't afford to be distracted by what's coming. The reality is that during the recession, we were asked not only not to get increases, but to take cuts. If there's a storm coming, you need to build barriers against that storm. We are the barrier against what is possibly going to happen in terms of a crisis in the city and in this country. So we need to be strong, we need to be secure, we need to be available, we need to exist in order to meet the needs that may come as a result of what happens at the federal level. And it's never about there not being money. It's always about the choices we make. Okay?
Exactly.
So if we
Exactly.
choose to invest, we can make a difference. If we choose to invest in something else, then we don't get taken care of. But don't get distracted by the dollars. The dollars are there, it's choices. So let's make sure that they make the right choices.